My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 31 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your future quietly collapses is that it rarely sounds like a disaster when it begins. There's no dramatic music, no warning, no shift in the air that tells you your life is about to split into before and after. Sometimes, it begins with a sentence spoken casually in a room you thought was safe. Ethan and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. For most of that time, I told people we had something solid, something real, the kind of relationship that had already been tested and survived. People admire that kind of story. They hear resilience, commitment. They don't hear what it costs to hold something together when cracks start forming underneath. They don't hear the quiet compromises. The things you convince yourself are normal, because the alternative is admitting you've built your life on something fragile. We met 5 years ago at a New Year's party. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. The kind of man who didn't need to dominate a room to be noticed. He just existed, and people leaned in. I liked that about him. I liked that he wasn't loud. I liked that he felt safe. At the time, I had already built a stable life for myself. I worked in IT consulting. Nothing glamorous, but consistent, predictable. I made good money. Around $140,000 a year. I owned my house. Not because I was lucky, but because my grandmother left it to me before she passed. It was the one thing in my life that felt completely mine. No shared history, no conditions, just mine. Ethan moved in after a year of dating. We got engaged 2 years later. Everything followed the timeline people expect when things are right, or at least when they look right from the outside. 18 months ago, we started trying for a baby. It didn't happen. Month after month, nothing. We went through tests, appointments, specialists, the kind of process that slowly drains the excitement out of something that's supposed to feel hopeful. Eventually, we got answers. He had some fertility issues. Not impossible, just difficult. I told him it didn't matter, that we'd figure it out together. And I meant it, because I thought we were a team, because I thought love worked like that. 6 months ago, we found out I was pregnant. I cried. Not the quiet kind of tears you can hide. Real tears. The kind that make your chest ache because something you almost gave up on suddenly becomes real again. Ethan hugged me, told me this was the beginning of everything. I believed him. God, I really believed him. Last Saturday, I was supposed to be out running errands. Hardware store, groceries, dry cleaning. A normal day. The kind of day that doesn't feel important until it becomes the day everything changes. I had already been driving for about 10 minutes when I realized I forgot my wallet. I remember laughing at myself, turning the car around, thinking how typical it was, how nothing about that moment felt unusual. When I got back home, I entered through the garage, and I heard his voice, upstairs, in the nursery, the room we had just finished painting the week before. Soft yellow walls, white trim. I had stood in that room just days earlier, imagining holding my baby there, imagining a future that felt whole. I started walking up the stairs. I was going to say hi, maybe tease him for being in there without me. But then I heard another voice, a woman's voice, familiar, too familiar, his ex-girlfriend. I stopped. Halfway up the stairs, something in my chest tightened. Not fear, not yet, just instinct, the kind that tells you to stay still, to listen. Even if part of you already knows you're about to hear something you won't be able to forget. She was on speaker. I could hear every word, clear, sharp, unfiltered. So, she said, you're really going through with it? A pause. Then Ethan laughed softly. Why wouldn't I? That was always the plan. My hand tightened around the railing. I felt it before I understood it. That subtle shift, like the ground under you moves half an inch, just enough to throw everything off balance. His ex hesitated. I don't know. 4 years is a long time. Don't you feel anything for her? And then he laughed again. Not nervous, not conflicted, just amused. She's fine, he said. She's stable, responsible, a good provider. Provider, not partner, not fiancé. Provider. But come on, he continued. You've met her. She's predictable, boring, safe. That's not the life I want forever. I stopped breathing. Literally. My body forgot how. Once the baby's here, he said, I'm done. Child support from her salary, plus whatever I get from the split. I'll be set for a while. Gives me room to actually live. The words didn't hit all at once. They landed slowly, one piece at a time. Like something sharp being pressed into your skin, not enough to make you pull away immediately, just enough to hurt. His ex lowered her voice. What about the house? You said she owns it. That's the tricky part, he admitted. She had it before we got engaged, so I probably won't get that. But 4 years together, a baby, California laws, I'll walk away with something. I already talked to a lawyer. A lawyer. He already had a lawyer. And she has no idea, the ex asked. Ethan scoffed softly. Please, Lauren thinks I'm in love with her. She's so grateful to have me. It's actually kind of sad. Something inside me didn't break. It didn't shatter. It just went quiet. That was the moment I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. But I hit record, and I stood there in that hallway, listening to the man I was going to marry explain, calmly, casually, how he had been planning to destroy me from the beginning. I recorded everything, every word, every laugh, every detail of a plan that suddenly made the last 4 years of my life feel like a performance I didn't realize I was part of. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I just stood there, staring at nothing, trying to understand how something that felt so real could turn out to be nothing more than strategy. Then I turned around, walked downstairs, left the house, and drove for 2 hours, without music, without direction, just driving. That night, I came home. I smiled. I asked him how his day was. I let him kiss my forehead. I let him rest his hand on my stomach and talk about our future like he hadn't just rewritten it without me. I even told him I loved him before we went to sleep. And somewhere between the moment I closed my eyes and the moment morning came, I stopped being his partner and started becoming something else entirely. Sunday dinner at Ethan's parents' house had always been predictable. That was part of its charm. His mother cooked too much food, always insisting everyone take seconds, then thirds. His father asked polite, surface-level questions about work like he was checking boxes. His younger brother showed up when he felt like it, usually late, usually distracted. It was routine, safe, normal, the kind of setting where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. Which is exactly why I chose it. All week, I played my role perfectly. I smiled when Ethan talked about baby names. I nodded when he complained about work. I let him hold me at night like nothing had changed. Because outwardly, nothing had. But internally, every word he said felt different now. Every touch felt calculated. Every smile looked rehearsed. And the strangest part? He had no idea. Not even a flicker of suspicion. He still believed I was exactly who he thought I was. Trusting, grateful, safe. By Sunday afternoon, I had already made my decision. Not just to leave, but how. Dinner started like it always did. The table was full. His mom was talking about planning a baby shower. His dad asked me about a recent project at work. I answered politely, calmly. If anyone noticed the difference in me, they didn't say anything. Ethan sat next to me, one hand occasionally resting on my back, like he needed the physical reminder that I was still there. Still his. About halfway through the meal, his mother smiled at us. I still can't believe we're finally getting a grandbaby, she said. You two must be so excited. I felt Ethan glance at me, waiting, performing. I smiled. Yeah, I said softly. It's been a long road. That part at least was true. Then Ethan spoke, and something inside me snapped into place. I'm just really lucky, he said, looking around the table. Not everyone gets a partner like Lauren. She works so hard, takes care of everything. I don't know what I'd do without her. There it was. That word again. Partner. Provider. Convenience dressed up as appreciation. The audacity of it was almost impressive. I smiled, not because I felt anything close to warmth, but because I suddenly understood something very clearly. If I confronted him privately, he would twist it, deny it, cry, apologize. And maybe, just maybe, a small, hopeful part of me would want to believe him. Long enough for him to adjust his plan. Long enough for me to lose control of the truth. No, that wasn't going to happen. I set my fork down gently, wiped my hands with my napkin, and looked around the table. Actually, I said, my voice calm, steady, almost conversational, since we're all here, there's something I think you should hear. Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? I met his eyes. And for the first time all week, I let him see something real. Last Saturday, I said, I came home earlier than expected, and I heard something interesting. The room shifted, subtly, not yet tense, but aware. I recorded it, I continued, because I wasn't sure I'd believe it later if I didn't. Ethan's expression changed, just a little. Confusion, tightening into something sharper. Lawrence, he started. I didn't let him finish. I think your family deserves to hear it too. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, connected it to the small Bluetooth speaker his mom kept on the counter, usually for music during dinner. The irony didn't escape me. Then I pressed play. At first, no one reacted. It took a second for them to recognize the voice. Ethan's voice. Casual. relaxed, unaware. So you're really going through with it? His ex-voice followed, then his response. Why wouldn't I? That was always the plan. The silence in the room became something physical, heavy, unavoidable. I didn't look at Ethan. Not yet. I watched his parents. His mother's face slowly draining of color, his father leaning forward slightly, like he hadn't heard correctly. Then the next part played. She's fine, a good provider. A sharp inhale from across the table. Once the baby's here, I'm done. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. Child support. I'll be set. His father's jaw tightened. She thinks I love her. It's kind of sad. That was the moment everything broke. Turn it off. Ethan's voice. Not calm anymore. Not controlled. Sharp. Urgent. I didn't. I let it play. All of it. Every word. Every laugh. Every detail of a plan that turned me into a transaction. By the time it ended, no one spoke. No one moved. The room felt hollow, like something essential had just been removed from it. I finally looked at him. Ethan's face had gone pale, then red. His eyes were wide, not with guilt, but with panic. Yes. That's not, he started, his voice cracking. That's not what it sounds like. I tilted my head slightly. Really? My voice stayed calm, almost curious. What context makes I'll be set with child support sound better? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the table like someone might help him. No one did. His father stood up slowly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Is this true? He asked, his voice low, controlled in a way that felt more dangerous than shouting. Did you plan this? Ethan swallowed hard. It's not that simple. Answer the question. Silence. Ethan looked down, and in that moment, he told the truth without saying a word. His mother started crying, softly at first, then harder, the kind of crying that comes from disbelief more than sadness. I stood up. My chair made almost no sound. I've already contacted a lawyer, I said. I just wanted everyone here to hear this before any stories get adjusted. Ethan looked up at me then, really looked at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. Lauren, please. I shook my head. No. Just that? Nothing more. Because there was nothing left to say. I walked out. Behind me, I heard it start. His mother asking questions through tears. His father raising his voice. Ethan trying, failing, to explain something that no longer had a version that made sense. I didn't stop. Not for any of it. The drive home felt different from the one the week before. Not numb. Not lost. Focused. I packed a bag. Not mine. His. Clothes. Shoes. Toiletries. Everything he would need. Nothing more. Then I placed it by the front door. And I changed the locks. The house had been mine before we ever met. One of the few truths that hadn't changed. Around 10 p.m., he showed up. I saw him through the security camera first. His face was streaked with tears. Mascara from his mother's house still faintly smeared on his collar where she must have hugged him. He knocked. Hard. Lauren, please, open the door. I didn't move. Mom. Please, he tried again, his voice breaking. We need to talk. You can't just do this. I walked over to the door. Didn't open it. Spoke through the intercom instead. Your things are outside. Silence. Then, you're throwing me out? I'm carrying your baby. The words hit differently now. Not emotionally. Strategically. We'll communicate through attorneys, I said. Flat. Final. He banged on the door. Louder this time. Lauren, don't do this. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I almost smiled. He stayed there for 20 minutes. Knocking. Pleading. Switching between anger and desperation. Eventually, headlights pulled into the driveway. His brother. Ethan stood there for a long moment after that, then grabbed the bag. Didn't look back. That was 4 days ago. And somehow, that was only the beginning. The first thing my attorney did on Monday morning was ruin the fantasy that the recording would save me. Not legally. Not in the clean, satisfying way people imagine when betrayal feels obvious and proof feels undeniable. His office was on the 10th floor of a quiet downtown building with beige walls, neutral art, and that strange, sterile calm places like that always seem to have. I sat across from him with a printed transcript of Ethan's recording in my bag and the original audio, saved in 4 separate places. I needed him to tell me that what I had was enough, that the truth mattered, that exposing Ethan's plan would protect me from losing anything else. Instead, he folded his hands on the desk and said very gently, "This helps your narrative. It helps establish intent. But California is a no-fault state. The court is not going to punish him for being manipulative." I stared at him. What do you mean it won't punish him? I mean, he said, Even if he entered the relationship planning to leave later and seek support, the court generally cares about asset division, custody, and the best interests of the child. Motive is emotionally significant. Legally, it has limits. That felt like being hit a second time. Not as sharply as hearing Ethan's voice in the nursery, but heavier, more exhausting. Because this time it wasn't my heart breaking. It was my belief that truth automatically leads to justice. My attorney walked me through it piece by piece. The house was mine. Premarital asset. Protected. My inheritance stayed mine. Savings from before we got engaged stayed mine. But anything earned or saved during our years together, that was different. Community property. Potentially divisible. And child support? I asked, even though I already knew. If the baby is yours, he said, then yes, absolutely. Whatever his intentions were, the baby is innocent. I looked away, toward the window. At traffic moving far below, like people in another world, still got to have ordinary Mondays. I understand that, I said quietly. I'm not blaming the baby. I know, he paused. Do you have any reason to believe the child might not be yours? The question lodged in my chest. A week earlier, I would have said no without hesitation. Now? Now I wasn't sure I knew anything at all. I didn't, I said, before, but now I don't know what's real. He nodded once. Then we keep that option open. Oh. By the time I left his office, I understood something I hadn't wanted to understand. The recording was not a weapon. It was a shield. It would not destroy Ethan. But it might protect me from the versions of this story he would try to tell next. And he did try. Almost immediately. Ding. Within 48 hours, I began hearing whispers. At first, through mutual friends. Then through not-so-mutual ones. Then through silence. The kind that appears where support should be. Ethan's version was spreading. According to him, I had humiliated a pregnant man in front of his family. I had secretly recorded him during a vulnerable moment. I had thrown him out while he was carrying my child. I had become cold, cruel, vindictive. It was almost impressive how quickly he adapted, how effortlessly he took his own strategy of emotional leverage and turned it into a public performance. One of his friends messaged me on Tuesday afternoon. What kind of woman humiliates her pregnant fiancé in front of his whole family? I stared at the message for a full 30 seconds. Then I sent the audio file. Nothing else. No explanation. No argument. Just the truth. She never replied. Wednesday night, his mother called. For a moment, I considered not answering. But curiosity won. Lauren, she said, voice strained and uneven, I need you to understand something. Ethan made a terrible mistake. I know that. But he's pregnant. He's emotional. You can't just abandon him. The word abandon almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. I'm not abandoning him, I said. I'm divorcing a man who admitted clearly that he never loved me and planned to use our baby as leverage. He was upset. He said it was always the plan. Silence. Then, softer, he says he didn't mean it like that. Then how did he mean it? She didn't answer. Because there was no answer. Only discomfort. Only maternal instinct colliding with evidence she could not explain away. What do you want from him? She asked finally. An apology? Counseling? Time? I closed my eyes. What did I want? I wanted a version of the last 5 years that had been real. I wanted to erase the sound of him laughing with his ex in my baby's nursery. I wanted not to know. But none of those things were available anymore. I want a divorce, I said, that's all. She hung up without saying goodbye. Thursday was worse. I was at work. Late morning, regular meeting day, glass walls, polite conversation, coffee going cold beside my keyboard. My office building had seen Ethan before. Reception knew his face. He'd brought me lunch there. Flowers once. He had access in the casual, familiar way people do when they belong to your life. So when he walked in crying, one hand on his stomach, no one stopped him fast enough. He came straight to my desk. People turned instantly. Of course they did. There is no version of a visibly pregnant man crying in an office that doesn't pull every eye in the room. Please, he said, loud enough for half the floor to hear. Please just talk to me. I'm carrying your child. It was a perfect scene. A cruel one. The optics were devastating. He looked fragile. I looked still. And stillness, in moments like that, reads as cold. I stood slowly, kept my voice measured. This is not the place. Then where? He asked. Because you changed the locks. You won't answer my calls. You're acting like I'm your enemy. A few people exchanged looks. I could feel judgment moving through the room before anyone said a word. He knew exactly what he was doing. I understood that with almost detached clarity. He was choosing the audience, building the image. Pregnant fiancé, heartless woman. He had always been good at tone, at performance, at making selfishness look like vulnerability. Contact my attorney, I said. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I don't want attorneys, I want my fiancé. The word hit me with a strange hollowness, like hearing dialogue from a script that had already ended. You should have thought about that, I said, just loud enough for the nearest people to hear, before you spent years planning how to leave me and live off my money. The room shifted. Not fully, but enough. Confusion cracked. Doubt entered. Ethan saw it too. For one flickering second, something ugly passed across his face. Then security arrived. He started crying harder as they guided him away. By then the damage was done. To him, to me, to whatever was left of privacy. Friday morning, my attorney called before 9. There's been a police report. Everything in me went cold. What kind of report? He alleges emotional abuse, says you created an unsafe environment, isolated him, and forced him out while pregnant. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table, the same table where Ethan and I had once compared paint samples for the nursery. My attorney kept speaking, calm and efficient. This is not unusual. It can be used to establish a protective narrative in custody disputes. Do not contact him. Do not respond emotionally. Document everything. That word again. Narrative. Everyone had one now. Mine. His mother's, his friends. The police called that afternoon. The detective was professional, almost tired in the way people sound when they have already heard too many versions of human ugliness that week. I told him what happened, sent the recording, sent screenshots, sent footage from the doorbell camera of Ethan screaming on my porch after I told him his things were outside. I gave him my attorney's information and waited. There is a very specific exhaustion that comes from having to prove you are not the villain in someone else's story. It drains something from you, not just energy, trust, dignity, the sense that truth should be obvious when it is right there in front of people. The detective reviewed everything quickly. No charges, no action. The report, as my attorney later phrased it, had gone nowhere. But even unfounded accusations leave residue. You still imagine people wondering. You still feel the shape of suspicion where your normal life used to be. And then, 3 weeks into the proceedings, came the part I still wasn't ready for. Discovery. Financial disclosures, statements, expenses, account histories. My attorney called me in to review the first batch from Ethan's side. I expected the usual ugliness. Arguments over numbers, selective memory, posturing. Instead, buried inside a stack of routine documents were 3 hotel charges spread across the past year. 3 dates, 3 nights, all during times I had been traveling for work. I stared at them. The hotel name meant nothing to me, but the dates did. One was during a conference in Seattle, one during a client visit in Austin, one during the week my aunt had surgery and I stayed with family. It could have been anything. A friend, a break, a lie with an innocent explanation attached. But after everything else, nothing felt innocent anymore. My attorney saw my face. It may be nothing, he said carefully, but given the circumstances, I think we should consider requesting a paternity test. The words punched straight through me. A paternity test. For the baby whose heartbeat I had listened to in a dim examination room with tears in my eyes. For the child whose crib I had already assembled. For the future I was still grieving. I nodded anyway. Because trust, once broken this thoroughly, does not leave certain things untouched. Do it, I said. When Ethan found out, he called me himself. Late, close to 11. Ignoring whatever his attorney had told him about boundaries. Ignoring everything. I answered because I wanted to hear his voice when he realized I wasn't going to carry his uncertainty for him anymore. You're really doing this? He snapped. A paternity test? Are you serious? You had unexplained hotel charges. So now I'm cheating too? I don't know what you are, I said. That's the problem. Heavy silence. Then anger, sharpened by panic. You're humiliating me. The irony of that almost took my breath away. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. The baby is yours. Then the test will prove that. Another silence. This one different. Thinner. More dangerous. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Not softer. Colder. You are going to regret turning this into a war. I looked down at my hand on the table. At the ring I had stopped wearing 2 weeks ago. At the pale indentation it left behind. You started this long before I did, I said. Then I hung up. The court approved the request. Non-invasive prenatal paternity testing. A blood draw. Oh wait, a week that felt longer than the entire month before it. And while we waited, Ethan escalated again. He started a private online group. One of those support spaces that pretends to be about healing while quietly functioning as a campaign. Posts about surviving controlling partners. Posts about emotional neglect. Posts about women who use money to dominate pregnant men. Mutual friends got added. Screenshots found their way back to me. Some people asked careful questions. Some made assumptions. One woman I respected, someone who had known us both for years, sent me a screenshot and wrote, "I don't know what to believe anymore." So I sent her the audio. Again, no commentary. Just the truth. 10 minutes later, she replied, "I had no idea he said all that." That was the thing about proof. It didn't always win, but it kept the lie from standing uncontested. By the end of that week, I felt like my life had become two parallel tracks. On one side, legal filings, evidence, asset disclosures, appointments. On the other, the baby. Quiet kicks. Ultrasound photos in a drawer I hadn't opened again. A future that still existed, whether I was ready for it or not. And hanging over all of it was the test, the answer. The next fracture or the next burden. Either way, I knew when the results came in, nothing would feel simple again. The results came in on a Friday afternoon. I remember the exact moment my phone rang. Not because of anything dramatic, but because everything felt too normal. Sunlight through the kitchen window. A half-finished cup of coffee on the counter. The quiet hum of a life that, from the outside, didn't look like it was balancing on the edge of something irreversible. My attorney's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a second before answering. "Hi," I said. No small talk. No build-up. Just that one word. He didn't make me wait. "The test came back," he said. "The baby is yours." I didn't respond right away. I thought I would feel something immediate. Relief. Joy. Closure. Instead, what I felt first was a strange, hollow pause. Like my body needed a second to catch up with information it had been bracing against. Then it hit. Relief. Sharp and overwhelming. Followed immediately by something heavier. Guilt. Guilt that I had doubted. Guilt that I had needed proof. Guilt that even after everything Ethan had done, a part of me still wanted certainty more than trust. "I understand," I said quietly. And I did. But understanding didn't make any of it simpler. From a legal standpoint, my attorney continued, this confirms your responsibilities. Child support will be calculated based on your income. Custody arrangements will follow standard guidelines unless contested. Right. There was no point arguing with reality. The baby was innocent. That had never changed. On the positive side, he added, his previous behavior, the recording, the false report, the workplace incident, the social media campaign, it all helps establish a pattern. It won't punish him, but it protects you. That word again, protects. Not wins. Not justice. Just protection. I'll take that, I said. And I meant it. At that point, I wasn't looking for victory anymore. Just stability. The divorce finalized 3 weeks later. No dramatic courtroom scene. No last-minute confessions. Just paperwork. Signatures. Numbers assigned to the dismantling of a life. He received half of what we accumulated during our years together. $86,000. I remember writing that number down and staring at it longer than necessary. Not because it would ruin me, but because I knew exactly what it represented. 3 years of shared life. 3 years of belief. Converted into a check. The house stayed mine. That was one thing that didn't slip through my fingers. Premarital. Untouched. Legally clear. Emotionally complicated. Because it was still the place where I had once believed I was building a future with someone who had already planned its end. Child support was calculated next. $1,840 a month. A number that would repeat itself in my life like a quiet reminder of everything that had happened. Not punishment, not revenge. Responsibility. Custody came last. Joint legal custody. But primary physical custody to Ethan. My attorney said it was expected. Courts favor the parent carrying the child, especially early on. I would have visitation. Every other weekend. One evening during the week. Structured time. Scheduled connection. A relationship defined in blocks instead of moments. I nodded when he explained it. Because there was nothing else to do. On paper, you could say Ethan walked away with a win. Money. Primary custody. Support. But paper doesn't measure everything. His family changed. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But permanently. His father stopped calling him as often. The conversations, when they happened, were shorter. More careful. Less certain. His mother still helped him. Still showed up. But something in her voice had shifted the last time she spoke to me. A quiet disappointment she couldn't quite hide. And his grandmother, the one who had sat silently at that dinner table while the recording played, I heard, through his brother, that she hadn't spoken to him since. Apparently, she said she didn't raise her grandson to be someone who treated love like a transaction. Some things, once heard, don't leave room for reinterpretation. His social circle changed too. That private group he created? It didn't last. Too many people heard the recording. Too many people realized the version of the story he was telling didn't match the one he had already told himself out loud, without knowing anyone was listening. Support turned into distance. Distance turned into silence. Reputation has a way of reshaping itself when truth enters the conversation. As for the hotel charges, I let it go. Not because I believed him, but because I understood something my attorney said very clearly. Proving an affair won't change the outcome. It will only prolong the fight. And I was tired. So tired. Some questions don't need answers if the answers won't change your path. 5 weeks after the divorce finalized, my daughter was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Small enough to fit perfectly in my arms. Heavy enough to change everything. Ethan didn't want me in the room. He made that clear. But legally, I had the right to be there. So I was. And it was awkward, tense, quiet in the wrong places, loud in others. The kind of environment where every glance feels loaded with history that no one wants to acknowledge. But none of that mattered when they placed her in my arms. She had my nose. I noticed it immediately. A small, ridiculous detail in the middle of something overwhelming. And suddenly, everything else fell away. Not permanently, not magically, but enough. Enough for that moment to belong only to her. She didn't ask for any of this. Not the lies. Not the manipulation. Not the broken version of a family she was born into. She just existed, and she needed to be loved. I looked at her, and I knew, without hesitation, without confusion, without doubt, I loved her more than I had ever loved anything. And that's where things became complicated, because loving her means staying connected to Ethan. For years, for birthdays, for school events, for questions I'll eventually have to answer. Questions like, why aren't you and Daddy together? I've thought about that more than I expected to. What I'll say, what I won't. I won't lie, but I won't turn her childhood into a battlefield either. She deserves better than that. The recording is still saved. Multiple places, cloud storage, an external drive, a copy with my attorney. Not because I plan to use it, but because someday, if the story changes, if she's told something that turns me into the villain, I'll have the truth. Ready. People have asked me if I regret playing it that night. At dinner, in front of his entire family. If I should have handled it privately, quietly. The answer is no. Because if I had done it quietly, he would have controlled the narrative. He would have rewritten what happened, turned it into something softer, something forgivable, something that might have pulled me back in long enough for him to finish what he started. By playing it there, I made sure the truth existed outside of just me, outside of his influence, outside of his ability to reshape it. Was it dramatic? Yes. Was it harsh? Probably. But it was also necessary. My life isn't what I thought it would be. At 31, I imagined something different. A partner, a shared future, a stable beginning for a family. Instead, I'm here, in the same house, with quieter rooms, a structured custody schedule, and a monthly reminder of a relationship that was never what I believed it to be. But I also have something real, something undeniable, something that isn't built on strategy or manipulation or illusion. I have my daughter, and that has to be enough. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Truth doesn't always protect you from consequences. It doesn't always deliver justice. It doesn't always make things fair. But it gives you something else, something quieter, stronger. It gives you clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the only solid ground you get. I'm done looking back. It's time to focus on what comes next.